I still remember the sound of my sister screaming my name like she'd caught me in the middle of a crime. "Celia, where's my ring?" Her voice cracked through the quiet house like glass shattering across a tile floor. I was upstairs in my room, folding laundry and listening to a podcast. It was a Tuesday afternoon, uneventful like every other day until it wasn't. I came downstairs confused, only to find Danielle pacing the kitchen like a woman possessed. She was holding her hand out, her voice rising with each breath. It was right here on the counter. I took it off while washing dishes, and now it's gone. She turned to me slowly, her face flushed with accusation. "You're the only one in the house. It has to be you." I blinked at her, stunned. At first, I thought she was joking. But then I saw the look in her eyes, hard, unforgiving, as if she'd already made up her mind. "Danielle, what are you talking about?" "I haven't even been in the kitchen," I said quietly. But she wouldn't hear it. She went on about how I'd always been jealous of her, how I had no direction in life, how I probably planned to sell the ring so I could finally afford to move out. I stood there speechless, my heart pounding in disbelief. Was she serious? Our parents, David and Lorraine, walked in 20 minutes later to full-blown chaos. Danielle spun the story faster than I could breathe. And to my horror, they believed every word. My mother's eyes filled with tears as she looked at me like I was someone she didn't recognize. My father said nothing, just folded his arms across his chest and gave me that look. That look of disappointment I hadn't seen since I failed my first math test in middle school. Only this time it wasn't about grades, it was about character. They searched my room. Every drawer, every pocket, even under the mattress. They didn't find the ring. But they found something else. A small envelope of cash I had saved up from working part-time shifts at the grocery store. Maybe $300 total. I'd been quietly putting it away, hoping to take a few courses at the community college again, maybe figure out my next step. But Danielle saw it differently. She pointed at it like it was evidence in court. "See? She sold it. That's the money." I tried to explain. I told them I'd been saving that money for months. I even showed them the envelope dated with scribbled notes. But it didn't matter. My voice may as well have been wallpaper. They didn't hear me. Or worse, they chose not to. Over the next few days, they pressed me harder, demanded I confess, said they'd call the police if I didn't come clean. My mother cried. My father stayed silent. Danielle hovered in the background, arms crossed like she was waiting for an award. I begged them to listen. I begged them to believe me. But the more I pleaded, the more guilty I looked in their eyes. On the fourth night, after dinner that I'd barely touched, my father walked into my room and said quietly, "You need to go." No shouting, no discussion, just a sentence that ended everything. "We can't trust you anymore, Celia. You've brought shame to this family." They gave me 2 days to pack, 2 days to erase myself from the only home I'd ever known. And as I zipped up the old duffel bag with shaking hands, I looked out the window and saw Danielle watching me from hers. She didn't smile. She didn't wave. Just stood there with a blank face, as if she were trying to decide whether I deserved what's happening, or if she'd gone too far. But she turned away, and so did I. Growing up, Danielle and I were inseparable, or at least, that's how I remember it. We shared a room for years, whispering secrets long after bedtime, pretending the lines between the beds were castles and moats. She was my older sister by 3 years, always the leader of our adventures. If she said we were pirates, I tied a bandana around my head. If she declared it was a jungle expedition, I followed barefoot into the backyard with a flashlight and a juice box. She made the rules. I just followed happily. Our parents always said we balanced each other out. Danielle with her ambition, me with my gentleness. But the older we got, the more that balance tipped. I started noticing things I didn't understand back then. The way Mom would light up when Danielle brought home straight A's. How Dad cleared his schedule to attend every debate competition, while I was lucky if they remembered my art show at school. At first, it didn't hurt. I was proud of her. I wanted her to succeed. I believed that if she shone bright enough, maybe some of that light would fall on me too. But light casts shadows, and I stayed in them. In high school, the gap widened. Danielle was valedictorian, captain of the debate team, and already talking about law school by junior year. I was just there, not failing but not excelling. I liked literature, but I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I worked part-time at a bookstore, took general classes, helped mom around the house. I wasn't lost, just still finding my way. But in a house where direction was worshipped, being uncertain felt like a sin. When Danielle left for college on a full scholarship to an Ivy League school, the house got quieter, but the pressure got louder. Everyone assumed I'd follow in her footsteps, but I didn't. I enrolled at the local community college, dropped out after a year, and started picking up shifts at the grocery store. I told myself I was just taking time to figure it out. But every time Danielle came home with stories about her internships or city life, I felt smaller. Not because she made me feel that way, but because everyone else seemed to. She'd walk in with expensive coats and confident smiles, and suddenly I became invisible in my own home. Our parents hung onto every word she said, laughed a little louder when she was around, asked her opinion on everything from politics to paint colors. Me, I cleared the dishes. Still, I never hated her. I told myself this was just how life worked. Some people soared early. Others took longer to build their wings. Danielle and I weren't close anymore, but I didn't think we were enemies. I didn't think she saw me as a threat or a burden. I thought we were just different people, walking different roads, still bound by shared blood and childhood memories. But I was wrong, and that mistake would cost me everything. The house was quiet the morning I packed my things. Too quiet. No footsteps, no clinking dishes, no idle chatter from the TV. Just the hum of the old refrigerator and the sound of my heartbeat pounding in my ears. I folded clothes I had worn for years, tucked away notebooks filled with half-started poems and to-do lists I never finished. Everything I owned fit into a faded duffel bag and an overstuffed backpack. It wasn't much, but it was mine. No one helped. No one even came to the door. I kept waiting, hoping for someone to stop me, to say it was a mistake, that they believed me. But the hallway remained empty, and the silence screamed louder than any words ever could. I lingered by the front door, my fingers resting on the knob, when I looked up and saw her, Danielle, standing in her old bedroom window watching me. Her face was unreadable, arms crossed over her chest. For a second, just a breath, I thought I saw something in her eyes. Doubt? Guilt? But then she looked away, turned her back, and that small flicker of hope inside me went out. That was the moment it truly hit me. I wasn't just leaving a house. I was leaving a life, a childhood, a family. I was being erased like chalk from a board, without ceremony, without care. Harper picked me up 20 minutes later in her beat-up Corolla. She didn't ask questions, just threw my bags into the back seat and handed me a coffee. "I got cream and sugar," she said quietly. "Didn't know how bitter you wanted today to taste." I laughed, but it cracked halfway through. I hadn't cried when they accused me, not when they searched my room, not even when they gave me the deadline to leave. But sitting in that car, holding a cup of coffee too hot for my shaking hands, the tears came. Harper let me stay on her couch. Her apartment was small, just one bedroom and a kitchenette, but it was warm, and it didn't carry the weight of betrayal. Still, I didn't sleep much. I kept waking up at 3 a.m., certain I'd heard someone calling my name, only to realize no one would be calling for me now. I applied for every odd job I could find, dog walking, dishwashing, passing out flyers. Anything to keep me moving. Anything to drown out the echo of Danielle's voice accusing me, the look in my mother's eyes, the silence of my father. Nights were the hardest. I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, wondering if this was how exile felt. Not dramatic or loud, just unbearably quiet. I didn't tell anyone the full story, not even Harper. How could I explain that my own sister had destroyed my life with a lie? That my parents had tossed me out like I was disposable? I was ashamed, not of what they thought I did, but of how quickly I broke the moment they stopped believing in me. There's one thing I held on to, though, a thin thread of resolve woven through the wreckage. I told myself over and over, like a prayer, I would survive this. I would make something out of this mess, not to prove them wrong, but to prove to myself that their rejection wasn't the end of me. They shut the door on me, but I still had keys to my own future, and I was going to use them. The days blurred together after that. I measured time in job applications and vending machine snacks. In the hours between Harper's shifts and the nights, I could afford a motel bed instead of her couch. It wasn't stability. It wasn't home. But it was motion, and sometimes that was enough. I took anything I could get, clearing tables at diners, folding clothes at a thrift store, helping a neighbor's cousin organize a garage. One week, I walked dogs in the rain for 7 hours straight and came home soaked and shivering with just enough money for gas and a single hot meal. But I didn't complain, because each dollar I earned was mine. No strings, no judgment, no one holding it over my head like proof that I didn't belong. Eventually, I landed a job at a distribution warehouse on the edge of town. The hours were long, the work unforgiving. My arms ached from lifting crates, and my legs throbbed every night. But the paycheck was steady, the routine grounding. For the first time since I was kicked out, I had something to hold on to. I moved into a shared house with 3 other women, co-workers, mostly strangers. We rotated fridge space and bathroom schedules, traded stories about broken machines and broken men. It wasn't glamorous, but it was safe, and it was mine. I bought a small desk from a secondhand store and placed it by the window in my tiny room. On weekends, I signed up for online classes, business management, basic accounting, a few lectures on supply chain theory. I didn't know exactly where it would lead, but I knew I couldn't stay where I was. Not physically, not mentally. Some nights, I'd still find myself staring at the ceiling, replaying it all. Danielle's voice echoing like a curse. The way my mother wouldn't meet my eyes. My father's silence. Those memories didn't fade. They sharpened, but over time they stopped cutting. They became something else, fuel. I didn't reach out to them. I didn't answer the messages that trickled in from unknown numbers. We need to talk. You can come home. Let's fix this. I read every word and said nothing. Because for once in my life, I wanted to see who I could become without their voices shaping mine. I made new friends at the warehouse, people who didn't care about my past, who valued my work, who laughed with me during break-room lunches and offered rides on stormy mornings. I started wearing clothes that felt like me, not the versions of myself I thought my family wanted. I dyed the tips of my hair copper. I pierced my ear again. Small rebellions, quiet declarations. And slowly I began to realize I wasn't just surviving. I was growing, not in spite of what they did, but because of it. I was no longer Danielle's shadow. I was no longer the uncertain one. I was Celia Monroe, standing on my own feet, learning how to build a life from the pieces they left behind. 3 years. That's how long I lived with the weight of a crime I didn't commit. 3 years of silence stretching between me and the people who once called me family. Birthdays came and went. Holidays, too. I'd see families shopping together at the mall or laughing in restaurants, and something inside me would twist, not out of jealousy, but out of grief for something I used to have and could never get back. The voicemails started in the first few weeks after I left. My mother's voice, tight and tearful. "Celia, please call us. We just want to talk." My father texted occasionally, short, emotionless notes like, "Hope you're okay," or "We should meet." I never replied, not because I didn't hear them, but because I did, and it hurt too much. Danielle didn't call, not at first, not for almost a year. Then she showed up one day, at the warehouse. I was on break, sipping burnt coffee, and listening to one of the newer hires rant about her ex when I saw her. Standing by the time clock, clutching her purse like it was the only thing holding her together. Her hair was tied back. Her makeup was perfect. Her face, not so much. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. She didn't see me right away, but when she did, her eyes locked onto mine. Wide. Searching. "Celia," she said, almost a whisper. I didn't move. I couldn't. My heart thundered in my chest, but my feet stayed rooted to the linoleum floor. "I just want to talk," she said. "Please." But I turned away, walked back toward the loading dock. I heard her voice calling behind me, but I didn't look back. I couldn't let her rewrite the story just because she was ready to face it now. I had spent too long trying to survive the silence she left me in. After that, I blocked her number. Again, changed my route to work. Told my supervisor I'd prefer not to have any visitors unless they were on a list. I didn't explain. She didn't ask. The truth was, I wasn't angry the way I used to be. I was tired. Tired of carrying the guilt they placed on me. Tired of wondering why no one had stood up for me. Tired of being a ghost in my own history. I had made peace with the fact that I might never be vindicated. That the truth might stay buried beneath a story Danielle told because she was scared or careless or just cruel. I didn't know which hurt more. Sometimes, in the quiet moments before sleep, I'd picture what it would have looked like if they had believed me. If my father had said, "We'll figure this out together." If my mother had looked me in the eyes and said, "I trust you." If Danielle had admitted her mistake before it became a wound too deep to close. But that was the kind of scene that only lived in movies. Not in real life. Not in mine. Instead, I built new rituals. Friday night ramen with my housemates. Morning runs before the sun came up. Online classes where I could raise my hand without anyone asking who my sister was. I found joy in the small things. Peace in the ordinary. But even with all of that, there was still a part of me that wondered, would the truth ever come out? Or was I doomed to carry their shame forever, like a label I never asked for? Then, one rainy Wednesday morning, an email landed in my inbox. Subject line, "We need to talk." Zenda, date. I stared at the subject line for a long time. "We need to talk." My first instinct was to delete it. I had seen too many messages like that. Words that promised closure, but only reopened wounds. But something about this one felt different. Maybe it was the timing. Maybe it was the silence that had preceded it. Or maybe, after 3 years of trying to forget, I was finally ready to know. I clicked it open. The message was short. Just 2 lines. "Celia, we found the ring. It was never stolen. Please call me." My breath caught in my throat. I read it again. And again. The ring. The ring that had torn my family apart, cost me my home, shattered everything I believed about loyalty and love, wasn't stolen. I picked up my phone with trembling hands and dialed the number. My father answered on the second ring. "Celia," he said, his voice rough, older somehow. "Thank you for calling." There was a pause, a silence that stretched like a canyon. I didn't speak. I waited. He took a deep breath. Danielle knocked it into the garbage disposal. Apparently, when she was doing dishes that day, it must have slipped off her finger. She never realized. The disposal started making weird noises last week, and we called a plumber. He took it apart, and there it was. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I felt frozen. Not in relief. Not even in rage. Just hello. "She's devastated," he continued. "Says she's been thinking about that day every night since. She wanted to call you herself, but I thought I should be the one to say it first. Celia, we're so sorry. We were wrong. All of us." I pressed the phone tighter to my ear, as if that could stop the storm rising inside me. 1,000 thoughts fought for space. How did you not check? How did none of you stop to think I might be telling the truth? You chose her. You always did. "I understand if you don't want to see us," he added. "But we'd really like to talk. In person, if you're willing." I ended the call without replying. Not out of cruelty, but because I didn't have the words. I sat on the edge of my bed for a long time afterward, staring out the window. Rain tapped against the glass like a rhythm I couldn't follow. The truth was out. I had been innocent all along, and they knew it now. But instead of feeling vindicated, I felt broken all over again, because they could say sorry, but they couldn't give me back the years they took from me. We agreed to meet at a coffee shop in the next town over. Neutral ground, far enough that no one from home would see us, but close enough that no one could use distance as an excuse. I picked the place. Quiet, unassuming. A little booth by the window where the light was soft and the chairs creaked when you leaned back. I arrived early. Too early. My hands wouldn't stop trembling, so I wrapped them around a cup of peppermint tea I didn't really want and waited. They arrived 5 minutes late. My father first, shoulders slumped, eyes heavy. Then my mother, her lips pressed tight, like she'd rehearsed everything she planned to say but had forgotten it all the moment she saw me. And finally, Danielle. She looked smaller. I don't mean physically. She just didn't carry herself the same way anymore. The confidence that used to pour off her in waves was gone. She wouldn't meet my eyes. No one spoke at first. Just the sound of the bell above the door, the hiss of the espresso machine, and the cautious thud of my heart. Then, all at once, the words came. Not from me, from them. "I'm sorry," my mother whispered. So sorry." Tears welled up in her eyes before she even finished the sentence. "I kept your room exactly the way you left it. I couldn't bear to touch anything. I thought maybe one day," my father cleared his throat. "I failed you," he said. "I let my judgment be clouded. I thought I was being fair, but I wasn't. I didn't listen, and I didn't protect you." Danielle's voice broke the moment she opened her mouth. "I ruined everything," she said. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I need you to know I've hated myself every single day for what I did." Her hands shook as she spoke. She talked about the guilt, the sleepless nights, the way she replayed that day over and over again in her head, wondering how she could have been so certain, so cruel. "You were always the gentle one," she said. "Even when we were kids, you followed me everywhere, trusted me with everything. And I betrayed that." Their words didn't fall on deaf ears. I heard every syllable, felt every tremble in their voices, but something inside me had changed. I couldn't meet their pain with open arms. Not yet. I took a deep breath. "I hear you," I said, "and I appreciate you saying all of this, but I can't just go back. I can't pretend those years didn't happen, that I wasn't alone, that I didn't have to rebuild everything because none of you stood up for me." My mother reached out, her hand hovering over the table. "Kaniukyo." I pulled back gently. "I'm not ready." The look on her face, it almost undid me, but I stayed firm, because this wasn't about punishment. It was about protection. I needed space. I needed time. And I needed them to understand that forgiveness wasn't a door they could walk through just because they finally knocked. After a few more words, mostly quiet ones, we parted ways. No big goodbye. No promises. Just an understanding this was not the end. But it also wasn't the beginning we once had. It was something else. And for now, that was enough. In the days that followed, I found myself circling back to that conversation in the coffee shop. Not the words, they blurred quickly, but the emotions, the ache in my mother's voice, the tightness in my father's shoulders, the guilt radiating from Danielle, like static electricity. I didn't regret going, but I didn't feel lighter either. They wanted to make things right. I understood that, but what they didn't understand, what I wasn't sure they ever could, was that the damage wasn't just a single crack in a window. It was a shattering. And I'd spent 3 years picking up shards they never even saw. So I called them. I told them I wasn't ready for full reconciliation, that I needed more time, more distance, that I was willing to keep in touch, but on my terms. Phone calls only. No unexpected visits. No talk of moving back home. No pretending we could erase the years in between. They were disappointed, I could hear it in the silence that followed. But to their credit, they didn't push. My mom asked if she could call me once a week, just to check in. I agreed. That felt manageable. My father said he'd email articles he thought I'd like, just like he used to when I was younger. I didn't respond to that part, but the next day I found an email with the subject line, "Thought of you." It was a story about a woman who started her own logistics company after years in warehouse work. I read it twice, and for the first time in a long while, I smiled. As for Danielle, I drew a harder line. I told her I wasn't ready, that I didn't know when or if I would be. Her betrayal had carved the deepest wound, not just because of the lie, but because she knew me, knew my heart, and still chose to destroy me with her silence. She didn't argue. She said she understood, that she would wait. But I wasn't waiting. I had a life to live, a future I was building, brick by brick, without their approval, without their blueprint. I wasn't closing the door on them. I was simply building a new one with locks I controlled, one they couldn't walk through unless they were invited. And for the first time, I felt safe on the other side. 6 months after that meeting, I got a call from a recruiter. A position had opened up at a logistics company based 2 cities over, larger, more complex operations than anything I'd handled before. Management level, full benefits, 401k, health coverage, more than double what I was earning. I took a breath. Then I said yes. It wasn't just a job. It was a shift, a declaration that I wasn't just rebuilding anymore. I was rising. Moving wasn't easy. I'd grown attached to the room I rented, the warehouse crew who'd become like a second family, even the late-night grocery runs with Harper. But I knew this was the next right thing. My therapist and I talked about it at length, how this wasn't running away, but stepping forward. On my own terms. The office was sleek, high-rise adjacent, open floor plan, exposed brick. I felt out of place at first, still carrying the dust of my past on my shoulders. But within a few weeks, I found rhythm. I was good at this. I could lead. I could organize chaos, and people listened when I spoke. 3 months into the job, I was asked to attend a vendor coordination meeting. One of our new clients, a boutique distribution partner, was merging with a supplier in our network. I scanned the agenda without much thought until my eyes landed on a name. Danielle Whitmore, Director of Regional Strategy, Glenway Brands. Danielle, my sister. I stared at the screen for a long time. She had taken her husband's name after the wedding. Of course she had. I'd never bothered to look her up, never felt the need. But there it was, plain as day. I didn't cancel the meeting. I didn't request to be reassigned. I just showed up. The room was glass-walled and bright, overlooking a city I was still learning to call my own. I arrived early, seated myself where I could see the door, and waited. When she walked in, she didn't see me at first. She was laughing, talking to her assistant, flipping through notes. Then her eyes met mine. She froze. The color drained from her face. She didn't speak, didn't move, just stood there, stunned like she'd seen a ghost. I nodded politely. No smile, no malice, just presence. The meeting began. I kept it professional, focused, efficient. I spoke clearly, answered questions, delegated tasks. Danielle barely said a word. Afterwards, she lingered by the door. I could feel her watching me, waiting for a signal, an invitation, a word. I gave her none, because this was the moment. Not yelling, not confrontation, just quiet, undeniable proof. She once threw me out of a life she thought I'd never recover from. Now I sat across from her at the decision table. She used to own the room. Now she couldn't breathe in it. I walked past her on the way out. Our shoulders didn't touch. Our eyes didn't meet again. But the silence between us said everything. I used to think family was forever. That blood meant safety. That no matter what happened, there'd always be a place I could return to, a room where someone would wait with the light on. But I learned the hard way. Sometimes family doesn't mean sanctuary. Sometimes it's the fire you survive. For years, I carried that weight like armor. The shame, the silence, the ache of being unseen. I built a life not in spite of it, but because of it. Every class I passed, every paycheck I earned, every morning I got out of bed and chose not to disappear. It wasn't about revenge. It was about becoming someone I could trust. Danielle never contacted me again after that meeting. Neither did my parents, not directly. The weekly calls with my mom faded quietly into voicemail. I didn't chase them. I didn't block them either. I just let the silence do what it needed to. Some doors aren't slammed shut. They just stay closed. But I didn't stay closed. I moved into a new apartment, my own, no roommates, no borrowed couches. I painted the walls a soft green and strung fairy lights along the window. I grew herbs in little pots on the sill, even though I barely cooked. I danced barefoot in the kitchen at midnight. I laughed, really laughed, with new friends who never once asked me to explain where I came from. Sometimes I still think about that house. The one I left with nothing but a duffel bag and a heart full of splinters. I wonder if they ever sit in the kitchen and feel the shape of my absence. If Danielle looks at her hand and remembers what she lost the day she pointed a finger at me. Maybe they do. Maybe they don't. But that's not my burden anymore. I no longer wait for apologies that come too late. I no longer shrink myself to keep the peace. I no longer measure my worth by the reflection in someone else's eyes. I don't need them to come back and tell me I mattered. I know I do, because I rebuilt myself in the quiet, and now I speak with volume. They once kicked me out of their world. I built my own, and I'm not letting them in unless they learn how to knock.